Hi, welcome to Android. And in this session, we'll be discussing about communicating between activities, how to communicate between activities. And let us understand that how we can go from one activity to other activity. And that we'll do using the next version of our Traveler Assistant project, version 2. So here we will discuss about interactivity communication. Activity lifecycle we are already done. So we are not going to discuss, and then we'll discuss about alert dialog. So these are the two important concepts which we will be understanding. Goal for this project is create two more activity and communicate between them. And then last one is add alert dialogs. Now how we are going to achieve this? First we'll create an XML layout for new expense activity. And then we'll create an activity class for this layout and declare in the manifest file. Then create another XML layout for new expense item activity. Create activity class for this and do the same thing. Then put the logic between these classes and write code to communicate between them. And the last one is add code to show alert dialog. So these are the various steps which we are going to do one by one to see that how you can communicate between an activity. Now let us see an example. I have two activity, activity A and activity B, and I want to launch a new activity B. So from A to B, I have to just say that you have to give the name of the activity class B. So, and then it will launch the activity B. So this is your activity B. In my case, the name of the activity B is second activity, but it can be any activity. And then there is a method called start activity, and you pass this object here, my intent. So that's pretty much as it is. Now when I want to do is that, so this is very simple. From here I want to go here. If you want to add the data, what you can do is that you can use a method called, let us assume that you want to send some data from here to here, and after that what he does, whether he comes back or not, you don't care. It is a one way, you are just transferring some data from activity A to activity B. It is like going from one HTML page to another HTML page, right? And you are sending some data. If you want to send some data, then in addition to this, before this, in between here basically, you have to do this. The code should be here. My intent dot put extra. So this is the method you have to call. And then you have to pass the data, whatever you can pass. Put extra method can take anything, integer, string, boolean, whatever you want to push, it can pass it. So that is the concept of going from screen A to screen B. Now I'm going to explain you what happens in another use case scenario when I want to go from activity A to activity B and want to come back. Now here what I am doing is that I am going from activity A to activity B and trying to come back from that screen. Request will go from here to here and the response will come back from here to here. Okay. Now what I am interested is that this guy will send some data to activity A and activity A will display the data. In our case what we are going to do is that we'll mark this one as a expense activity and this one will be expense item activity, and we'll develop the code to understand how it happens, expense item. Now before I get into the Eclipse, just to get a brief idea, in activity A, the sample code will look like this. First thing is that there will be some click event on which this will launch the new activity. Let us call on click, and either it will be on click or menu, either way. The point is that this is what you have to put. So let us call when activity A launches B step 1. When B comes back and pass it to A, this will call event 2, and then here you will call step 3. So step 1, A launches B. Step 2, B returns the data to A. Step 3, A takes that data and shows to you. So where is the code for 1, 2 and 3? This is the code for 1. This is the code for 3, and we'll show you the code for 2 in the next slide. Let us understand 1. So 1 is very simple. Create an intent object first. And here is this activity B. And then you say start activity for result. If you see that, here it's a little different. Start activity means it will launch another activity with no relation of a parent and child. But in this case, the moment you use this, there is a parent-child relationship. Okay. So when you say start activity for result, it means that you are starting a new activity which will send back some result. One more thing interesting is that, and that is this guy, and that is called pick contact request. What is pick contact request? It is just a ID which tells him that when this request was made to an activity, what was the ID passed, and when the response comes back, we check against the same request ID. So that is what the pick contact request is all about. So by doing this, activity B get launched. Now when it comes back, there is some code for here, but once it comes back, let us see the step 3, and then we'll come back. Okay. So step 3 is there is a method called onActivityResult. This method gets triggered whenever activity B closes. So by default, if you start an activity using start activity for result and that activity get closes, by default onActivityResult get triggered. So it is getting automatically triggered. And when it passes back the request code. It passes the result code and intent data. What are these 3 things and where they come from? All of these 3 things are passed from activity B to activity A by the Android framework. And request code is the same code. What was this one? It sends back. Okay. Result code is just a code like success, failure, could not connect, or all those things. And this is the data which we are interested into. So this is what we'll use to capture the data from B and get into A. And then this is just checking if result code is result okay and request code is same like the one with which I have sent. In that case, please capture the data. And then we are capturing the data here. We are taking out the data from data object. So that is what we see, and the return data is coming as a intent. Now, the next thing what we have to understand is that what happens in the code inside activity B, step 2. Inside the code in activity B, and this is for step number 2. Here what we do is that on some click, some button or menu, we'll say send back result, which is nothing but calling this method. Here we'll create a new intent with some name, return result, and we'll capture this data from that activity, and we'll create that data into an intent object, and this is the most important thing, set result. What set result does is that it informs the Android framework that result has been fine. I have been able to capture the data successfully, and I have put the data inside return intent. So please, whenever I am closed or I am done, please pass this information return intent to activity A or whoever has opened me. So framework knows that what was the request ID, who launched activity B and all. So it gives back to A, and that is the way it does. And by doing finish, I am not doing anything, just trying to close the screen. Okay. So let us go and write some sample code or example to do this. And in our case, there is no sample code. It is our real example called expense activity and expense item. So what we'll do is that we'll go back to screen and write this code.